Greetings, and welcome to SpinalTap Horror. Here at the Asylum, we're dedicated to bringing you the most hair-raising tales that send shivers down your spine. So please, sit back, relax, and count backwards from 10. The operation is about to begin.
Welcome, listeners, to a very special episode of SpinalTap Horror. Given that it's Hallows Eve, the Asylum tends to get a little crazier than usual. It's said that the veil between planes is always thinner this time of year. Spirits tend to make their way through, and some patients have been saying they've been hearing voices. But since this is an institution, that's not really all that abnormal, is it? But what is unsettling is the stories they tend to tell us. Tales of Halloween origins, urban legends, and the mischievous happenings that occur on All Hallows Eve. Like our first story tonight, written by Christopher Clayton Smith. Set in 1829 Dublin, Ireland, we follow a kind Irishman, one of good nature and outstanding morals. But make sure you never cross this man and his family, for you may become one of Jacko's lanterns. Jack O'Leary, or Jacko, as he was known to all, sat in the Brazen Head on a Saturday morning conducting his business as he always did. Criminal groups under the guise of family clans were no strange sight in Dublin, and the O'Learys were a local institution. However, Jacko was a bit of a Robin Hood. His transgressions included making sure the milk from his dairy cows was always accessible and promptly supplied to folks on the outskirts of town. On Saturdays, he loaded up his wagon, patted his mule Rory on the head, and came to the pub to make his deliveries and take orders for the coming week. Other clans, like the Walsh clan, rivaled Jack's. The Walsh clans were known scrappers and roughs, and they conducted business through threats and the occasional beating. Jacko, while not afraid of a scrap, was more of a beloved gangster, as his family provided a needed service outside the confines of the laws and taxes with his small dairy delivery. As his weekly business concluded, he set about finishing up his drinking business, paid his bill, donned his coat and hat, and stepped outside in the crisp afternoon air. Jack sat down the road, walking 3 blocks to Thom's barber shop. Danny Sullivan sat in the chair while Thom chatted with William Riordan, who sat in the back corner. Jack took off his coat and hat and hung them on the rack by the door and waited in his seat by the front window.
"Thom,"
he said, before giving a nod and a
"Good eye"
to Danny and William. Thom grinned and gave a hearty
"Jacko!"
while he pulled Danny into a recline and set about lathering his face for a shave.
"Mom,"
muttered Danny, while William gave a curt
"Afternoon."
Jack took his pocket knife from his vest and dug at the dirt under his nails while he waited. As Thom finished up Danny's shave, Jack loudly addressed William from across the room.
"My apologies, William, but the missus expects me back home early this evening. Consider giving me the chair?" "Aye,"
William said, letting out an audibly heavy sigh. Danny got up out of the chair, paid Thom his usual currency of a pouch of tobacco, and said his goodbyes. Jack sat himself down in Thom's barber chair and gave Thom a nod to drape an apron over him.
"How's your family, Jacko?"
Thom asked.
"Fair as always,"
Jack replied. Jack settled back into the chair as Thom trimmed his hair and reclined his head as he prepared to shave him. As Thom lathered Jack's face and neck, the front door burst open as 2 men rushed in. Jack closed his eyes as the men shouted and a roaring boom sounded out from the corner. Men screamed, fell with a thud, and squealed, kicked, and moaned. Jack stood up and wiped his face with a towel. He turned around to see Thom cowering off to the side with his hands over his ears. 2 of the Walsh boys were prostrate on the ground, laying in an enormous pool of their own blood. Darren Walsh was missing most of his midsection, lying still while his brother Connor was holding what was left of his left arm and had a massive wound across his chest. Connor's eyes were alert with panic as he kicked his legs in shock, unable to find his footing in the gushing blood and guts spilled on the floor. He looked like a chicken with his head cut off. He was so close to death, but he didn't even know it. Jack turned and looked at William, who was now standing out of his chair, crouched slightly to shield himself from the kick of the blunderbuss. He still pointed at the Walsh brothers. Jack nodded to him as the splintered door burst open and Jack's younger brother Martin and his cousin Edwin rushed inside. Edwin plunged a knife into Connor's chest, directly into his heart. Connor quickly fell still, his eyes staring at Jack. As the boys gathered the two bodies and began to drag them out to the waiting wagon, Jack called out,
Save the heads, lads.
Jacko turned to Thom and gently touched his arm.
Listen, Thom, I am sorry for the mess, old friend, but I do appreciate the tip. You and William come by the house any time for supper.
Jack walked out to the wagon and gently patted Rory on the snout and took out a parcel from the lapboard. He walked back inside and placed a cloth-wrapped bottle of milk in Thom's hands and said,
The boys will be back later to clean up the mess and fix your door.
Thom nodded and Jack went outside and climbed into the wagon. Martin and Edwin piled the Walsh's bodies into the back and climbed aboard.
Let's go get your brother, Edwin,
Jack said. At about the same time as William roared and was blowing holes in the two Walsh brothers, Edwin's brother Samuel arrived at the local disorderly house, where the Walsh elder John had a standing appointment on Saturday afternoons with Elizabeth Shandy. Samuel crept up to the second story and down the hall to room number 4. The door had been left open as per Jacko's arrangement with Miss Shandy. Samuel quietly opened the door to see Tom Walsh occupied in his business atop Miss Shandy. Elizabeth locked eyes with Samuel as he approached the bed and removed the razor from his pocket. Elizabeth turned her eyes towards John and moaned convincingly just before Samuel pounced upon the bed. Samuel firmly grabbed a handful of John's hair and pulled back his head, before he savagely slid the razor across the older man's throat. Elizabeth Shandy did not scream. She smartly kept her mouth closed as the blood sprayed across her face. Samuel pulled Walsh off of Elizabeth and wiped the blood from her face before placing 10 pounds on the bedside table. He then hoisted the body over his shoulder and walked down the stairs to meet Jacko with the wagon. The sun turned a golden orange as the afternoon slipped towards the evening on the wagon ride home. Jack guided the wagon into the barn as the boys unloaded the bodies of the Walsh clan. They placed the bodies on a large wooden table, while Jack gathered his snips, scoop, a saw, and his best knife. Jack looked down at his neighbors and now former rivals.
You fucking bastard, John,
he sighed.
You moved on me and now you and your boys are nothing but meat.
Jack then picked up the saw and removed the heads, as Martin and Samuel threw the decapitated bodies into the big pen. Next, Jack cut off the soft bits, lips, tongues, eyes, of each of the Walshes and threw them to the hounds. Jack looked down at the 3 heads before he took an iron rod and broke the jaw open of each man into a vicious and forever grin. That night, All Hallows Eve, Jack and his kin placed the heads on top of a fence post outside of the Walsh's family farm. Each head had a candle placed inside the overly exaggerated hanging jaw, creating a grim shadow that was only accentuated by the gaping black empty eye sockets above. Reputation meant everything in Dublin. And while the O'Learys weren't the first name that came to mind when one thought of folks not to cross, but after that Halloween day in 1829, word got out about Jacko's leering lanterns, and for the rest of his days, well, no one dared cross the dairyman. What an interesting story that was. It seems every country has their own origins of the jack-o'-lantern. In today's world, we see them more as a joyful celebration to have with the family, getting together with loved ones and carving the most intricate designs we can think of. But you must also make sure you pick the right pumpkin for the task, and pay close attention to the warning that our next author, Donavin Meeks, gives us, especially when you visit the pumpkin patch of 1,000 lost souls. Much like many others, every October I tend to take a trip to the pumpkin patch. My family has created a tradition out of it, as I'm sure is the case for many of you. and we have entire nights dedicated to everyone getting together to see who can create the most perfect jack-o'-lantern. We all enjoyed this tradition, most of us seeing it as our favorite part of the holiday. Everyone except my dad, that is. He never seemed to be around for our jack-o'-lantern carvings. He would spend his time either at his favorite dive bar or down in his man cave watching whatever football game was on. This year, whilst driving through the countryside, I noticed a raggedy sign just off the side of the road. Make your Halloween special at Jacko's Pumpkin Farm. Take the next right and meet your perfect pumpkin. The sign was etched in bright cartoonish lettering, accompanied by a skeleton with a jack-o'-lantern skull. I'd never seen the sign before, and not only that, but I've never heard of Jacko's Pumpkin Farm. I figured, what the heck, why not? Might as well give them a try. It's not like I have to buy anything. While making the turn, I felt the Halloween spirit rush through me as I drove past rows upon rows of tall oak trees, shedding their summer leaves. Driving on, I approached another sign. Jacko's Pumpkin Farm coming up, next right and through the gate. Right as I passed, the sight of two monstrous wooden gate doors caught my eye. They had been painted to look like giant jack-o'-lanterns staring back at oncoming customers. Cute, I thought. Perfect greeting. Approaching the gate, I pulled right upside the speaker that had been planted firmly in the ground. From it came the chipper voice of a young woman.
Welcome to Jacko's Pumpkin Farm. Please state your name and business.
This struck me as odd. Donavin? I'm here to look at your pumpkins.
Perfect. Please pull right on through, Donavin.
The heavy gate doors creaked and swung open, revealing thousands, and I mean thousands, of the most perfect-looking pumpkins I have ever seen. Each one was plump and brightly orange with precisely trimmed stems poking out from their round heads. My eyes lit up with amazement and my car filled with a dull orange hue. At the end of the field stood a shack. Assuming that's where the voice from the speaker had come from, I approached the quaint little building. I was befuddled to find that the entire place seemed to be empty. No lights, no sound, and not a soul in sight. Called out into the dark shack and received no answer. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand pressing firmly on my shoulder, causing me to jump.
Well, hello there. Sorry about that, friend. Didn't mean to startle ya. I'm Jack, or Jacko as people like to call me. Owner of this here pumpkin farm. You must be Donavin, I presume.
The man was about my height, balding, and he had this deep scent of candy apples coming from him. He wore a stained white t-shirt covered by overalls and had a bit of a pot belly that protruded his clothing. Yep, that's me. Nice to meet you, Jacko. This is quite the farm you got here.
Well, you know,
he said nervously, using a rag to wipe the grease from his face.
a farm's a farm. Now, obviously, you're here for the pumpkins, right? Now, what say we go find you the perfect one?
I agreed, and off we went. Jacko basically guided me, seemingly knowing exactly where he was going, before he stopped abruptly.
How tall might you be, Donavin?
I was a bit taken aback by this question. 6 even? Why?
I figured as much. About the same height as myself. Now, how much you weigh?
149.
Now, that, Donavin, can't say we're the same one. Alright, let me see here. Yeah, here we go. Follow me.
He led me to what could only be described as the best pumpkin I could ever dream of. Its seams were perfectly symmetrical. The roundness looked almost lab-made in its creation.
How about this one? That one look about right to you, Donavin?
That's
Perfect. That's what they all tell me.
So how much would that run me?
For you, on the house. We have a promotion going on for first-timers, and we anticipate you'll be satisfied enough to return.
I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, I know pumpkins are cheap as is, but for something this magnificent, so excellently crafted, I felt like I had just struck gold. The uncarved pumpkin weighed at least 75 pounds, so Jacko helped me lug the thing back to the parking lot. Arriving at the vehicle, Jacko then laid another piece of information on me.
Now, I'm sure you know, Donavin, this here is a special pumpkin. Whatever you do not carve it.
I felt my heart drop in my stomach as the words fell from his mouth.
Got it?
Okay, yeah, got it. Uh, may I ask why? Jacko had begun to sweat profusely, wiping it away with the rag from earlier.
So you see, this pumpkin knows exactly what it wants, Donavin. Its design was predetermined in its creation. Any work you do on it will pale in comparison to the work it will do on itself.
His eyes had gone dark and focused, and he appeared as though he was trembling slightly.
So I repeat, Donavin, do not carve that pumpkin. Okay? Do not carve it.
He kept repeating these words to me as I got in my car, and then he started to scream them as I started backing out of the parking lot. Once I made it home, I explained the experience to my parents. My mom said it was just some crazy pumpkin farmer who had been just a tad bit off his rocker. My dad, however, had the color drained completely from his face. He seemed to withdraw from the conversation, and he locked himself in his room. We didn't see him for the rest of the night, and by the next morning I started to worry about him. My mom told me he was feeling under the weather, but I knew that this just wasn't some sickness. I watched his face drop the moment I mentioned my pumpkin, so I approached him. Hey Dad, is there anything you want to tell me? What do you know about Jacko's pumpkin farm? He physically shivered at the name before recovering his face with his hands.
You mean the patch of 1,000 lost souls?
The nervousness in his voice made my blood run cold. What does that even mean? Do you not think that sounds a little ridiculous? My father threw his TV remote violently across the room, shattering it against the wall.
I was there, Donavin. Do you not understand that? I prayed to God every year this wouldn't happen. But it has. It has, and there's nothing, not a goddamn thing I can do about it.
His anger stunned me, though I guess it wasn't anger. He knew what was coming. He knew that my fate had been sealed.
I knew better, Donavin. I knew better than to make the mistake of buying that damn pumpkin. I felt it in my soul, the carnage that it would bring. I love you, son. Don't ever forget that.
He was now rocking back and forth, crying.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. How? I burned that place down years ago. How?
With that, I left him alone, and I went back to my room. Look, I'm writing this now because I took the pumpkin 3 days ago. Yet, already, I can see the outlines of my own face magically appearing in its orange flesh more and more with each passing day. I can feel the skin from my face peeling. I would wake up with slabs of flesh beside me on my bed. I even started getting morning sickness, and every time I throw up I see the disgusting slimy orange guts of a pumpkin falling from my mouth. All while my pumpkin continues to grow more and more lifelike. I can feel myself fading, and I'm afraid. Please, I'm begging you all, do not go to Jacko's pumpkin farm, where souls are replaced and humans come to suffer. Seems like the joy of pumpkin carving took a wrong turn for Donavin and his family. If only Donavin would have remembered the meaning behind the jack-o'-lanterns, maybe he could have had a more enjoyable Halloween. Luckily, our next author reminds us that jack-o'-lanterns are meant to be a source of protection from the things that we do not understand. So make sure you pay close attention to the message from Tall Bayou Man and light the pumpkin. We think pumpkins are just decorations for Halloween, right? What if I told you they were for protection from something we didn't know existed? Please, take caution to this warning. Every Halloween, we involuntarily enter into a ritual. The only way to maintain safety is to put a white candle inside of all of our pumpkins and keep them lit until sunrise. Why, you ask? It sounds crazy when I say it, but I lost my only son to the pumpkin patch. He was my everything. He was only 10 years old when they took him. It shattered my reality. I gave up on life. So to all the parents listening, please, make preparations. And if you value your child, you'll take this seriously. Every Halloween, I would take my son trick-or-treating. We would collect candy, go home, watch a kid-friendly spooky movie, and call it a night. My son and I would start the day by getting pumpkins, carving them with silly faces and putting vanilla candles inside of them. He said he liked the way vanilla and pumpkin smelled. It reminded him of some kind of strange Halloween candy. One Halloween, we just carved the pumpkins, and he told me not to buy vanilla candles. Even though I thought it odd, I bought the fake candles with the lights on them. It was the morning of Halloween. We were eating breakfast, and I was about to drop him off at school. We were laughing and making jokes when he said,
Hey, Dad.
"Yeah, Squirt."
I saw the kids from the pumpkin patch last night.
I thought he was making up a story to try and scare me like he always does. Yeah? Did they come in your room?
Actually, yeah. I didn't hear them come up the stairs, though. They had dirty feet and looked like they were playing in the mud. They were smiling and asked if I wanted to go and play with them. They seemed friendly, so I said yes. They told me just make sure you don't buy those vanilla candles. They don't like them. They make them sick.
My son told me that he'd make sure to get something else. Something that we didn't have to light, so that way he could go play with his new friends. My eyes got wide. Okay, Squirt, if that's what you want, I said.
Thanks, Dad.
He replied gleefully. No problem, son. We finished our breakfast, I dropped him off at school, and we went about our days. That night we had a good time trick-or-treating. We had big black trash bags filled with candy. We got home about 9 o'clock, ate some candy, watched our movies, and then off to bed. It was around midnight when I heard the noise come from my son's room. The smell of the mud was strong inside the house. It smelled like a garden that hadn't been attended to in years. I finally woke up and moved quietly and cautiously towards my son's room. There were muddy footprints on the stairs, too small to be an adult's. These were children's. What type of prank are these kids playing? I thought. As I got closer to my son's room, the noise that woke me up was chanting. I burst open the door. What I saw left me speechless. Wall to wall, kids' bodies with pumpkin heads. They were circled around my son's bed. Their ragged clothes and bare feet were covered in mud. I screamed for my son, and all at once the little pumpkin heads turned around to look straight at me. Different faces carved into each one. Some were crying, some sad, some smiling, and some looked vicious. Empty little pumpkin heads with nothing in them but big green lights behind the eyes. A tall dark figure had my son in a headlock. He was smiling.
Dad, they're gonna give me a pumpkin head.
I reached for my son. One of the little pumpkin kids jumped up and smashed his head into my face. It felt like steel. The dark figure said,
Sweet child, can I have your head?
My innocent son, thinking that it was a game, said yes. A loud snap rang through the room. The last thing I remember were two pumpkin heads hitting me from both sides. Then everything went dark. I awoke on the floor, surrounded by the children, green light still piercing through the holes of their pumpkin eyes. The eerie dark figure floated towards me and said,
Thank you for your contribution. Feel free to come search for him at the pumpkin patch anytime.
And just like that, they were gone, leaving nothing but muddy footprints scattered throughout the house. I'm still searching and figuring out a plan. I will get my son back, no matter what it takes, and I'll free the rest of those kids as well. But please, listen to my warning. Please light the pumpkin. Now, I'm not entirely sure where these people are finding these cursed pumpkin patches, but I do know one thing. I'm going to keep a good distance from any pumpkin farms this season. I sure do hope he finds his son, though. If he does go searching for him in the pumpkin patch, he should make sure to bring a light to guide him. Much like the couple in our next tale, written by Swaggittarius, we join a husband and wife, searching for their son lost in the darkness, with nothing to guide them but the faint flickering light of the lantern's glow.
Honey, the wind is roaring tonight. It's as if it wants to devour everything that walks on the ground.
I hear it too. That lantern's glowing that cursed blue again. You know what that means, right?
Terry, do you hear that? Do you hear the wailing? It's our Felix. I think he's hurt. He sounds like he's in pain. Oh dear, we need to go help him. Oh, my poor boy.
Pamela, there's no one wailing. Whatever you're hearing, it's the madness creeping in. It's All Hallows Eve. There are things out there that'll keep playing tricks on you until you lose your mind.
It's not madness. In fact, I'm the most clear-headed now that I've ever been. The lantern's flame is lighting up the darkness inside me. No one's playing tricks, Terry. It's Felix. He's out there in the dark, and he needs me.
Pam, my love, you're losing yourself. Fight it. We need to win this together.
There's no losing. I've already won. My boy's back home. Home to his mother. Home to me. I'm going to make the best choices for him. The lantern's glow will guide me.
Put the lantern away, please. I'm begging you. It's not the light that you see. The lantern's playing tricks on you. Don't you see the blue flicker? Do you not get what's happening tonight? Felix isn't coming back. Not to you. Not to me. Not to any of us.
Let go of my hand. How can you not hear your own son crying for help? Would you rather him dead? Would you be able to forgive yourself? Do you think I'll forgive you?
Pamela, it's not Felix. Felix can't be dead. Not again. You drowned him in the lake 4 years ago. And I forgave you. What's out there now is not Felix. And it's not human. It seems like we've been experiencing a lot of cautionary tales this season, warning us to always have some sort of protection against the dark forces creeping through on Hallows Eve. But what happens when the very thing that is meant to protect you becomes that of which to do you harm? Take our next story, for example. Written by David Leech, we follow a man who is burdened with the weight of keeping a failing farm alive. Not only that, but he is now terrorized by the very thing that was meant to protect his fields. The Harvester. The drought had stripped the life from everything, leaving the farm an expanse of powdered loam and dead corn husks. Thomas the farmer felt the failure in his bones, a deep corrosive emptiness. He found it 3 miles from the field, leaning against the fence line near the road. The old scarecrow, which they called Old Man Chaff, never moved. Supposed to be nailed to a cross in the North 40. But here it was, standing upright, its patched denim coat heavy and wet, though there'd been no rain. Thomas hauled it into the back of his pickup. It felt wrong. Too solid. Too dense. It smelled strongly of dry, crushed chaff and something metallic, like old blood left hot in a tin. He jammed the cross stake into the mud of the North 40 again. That night he couldn't sleep. The field was silent, but he heard the soft, endless rustle of straw being repositioned beneath his window. Thomas went out before dawn. The scarecrow was gone. He found it next to the porch, leaning against his boots. This time, it wasn't wearing its patched coat. It was draped in Thomas's own oilskin barn jacket, the one he'd left hanging on the back door. His wife Sarah thought it was a prank being played by the neighbor kids, but Thomas saw the difference. The sackcloth head, usually slack, was now pulled tight, and those painted eyes, 2 black, unblinking circles, they seemed to possess a depth he'd never seen before.
Ah, it's heavy,
Thomas said, dragging it away.
like it's been soaking up the earth or something.
The next day, Old Man Chaff was standing in the middle of the yard, its straw hands tied around Thomas's old hickory walking stick. The day after, it was gone. But when Thomas looked in his mirror, he noticed the scarecrow's unblinking, staring posture reflected in his own shoulders. Thomas stopped sleeping after that. He watched the cornfield from his porch, with only the taste of bitter coffee to keep him awake. The scarecrow was always there, leaning, watching. And then it wasn't. He found it standing in the kitchen doorway, its body now filling out the shoulders of his favorite threadbare flannel shirt.
Hey, get out!
Thomas roared, grabbing a rusty pitchfork. The scarecrow didn't move. Its head tilted, and a dry rasping sound like 1,000 insect wings beating against a leather drum came from its stitched mouth.
Tired, Thomas?
The voice whispered. The sound was horribly familiar. Thomas's own timbre, dry and devoid of all humanity.
The farm is heavy. The failures are many.
The fear froze Thomas to the floor. The scarecrow's eyes, those twin black circles, were now studying him.
I am the keeper.
The scarecrow rasped.
I keep things away. But you're hollow now. I can feel your emptiness.
The air in the kitchen grew cold, now smelling intensely of sun-bleached cotton and old decay. The scarecrow pushed off the doorframe. As it moved, the denim trousers slid slightly, and Thomas saw it. The legs were no longer wood and straw. They were faintly vascular, pale and sickly white, like mushrooms grown in darkness.
You're finished,
the thing said, its voice now wet, gaining life.
Now let me be your rest.
Thomas swung the pitchfork. The tins passed through the scarecrow's chest, making a horrible shredding sound of dry fiber and snapping bone. But the scarecrow didn't bleed. Instead, a massive plume of dry, choking corn chaff exploded from the wound, blinding Thomas. The air filled with the dry, dusty smell of death. Thomas stumbled back, clutching his eyes. When he could see, the scarecrow was standing inches away, its form subtly taller, wider, more defined. The straw filling was gone. The flannel shirt was now filled with taut, dry muscle that strained the stitching. The scarecrow then reached out its hand, it no longer a bundled glove. It was long, thin, and pale, with nails like yellowed bone. As the pale fingers brushed Thomas's forearm, the exchange began. Thomas felt a dizzying sense of relief. The weight of the farm, the shame of his debt, the grief over the drought, it all vanished in a blissful, overwhelming wave. He sighed a deep, content breath he hadn't taken in years. Then he realized the true horror. The relief was an extraction. His skin instantly felt cold, dry, and brittle. His clothes became immensely heavy. He felt his veins constrict, his blood growing slow and thick. The sensation of his own life was being drained out, leaving behind only the dry, rasping husk of his failures. The scarecrow, now filling the flannel shirt perfectly, its face tightened into Thomas's own rugged features, only whiter and colder. It smiled a terrible, non-human smile.
Thank you for the laugh,
the scarecrow whispered, its voice now Thomas's own, rich and deep.
And the emptiness that drew me.
Thomas collapsed to the floor. His clothes felt like heavy sacks. Thomas tried to speak, but only a dry, pitiful rattle of chaff and bone fragments came from his mouth. He looked up at his wife Sarah, who stepped into the kitchen. She saw the man standing in Thomas's flannel shirt, breathing in a way she hadn't seen him breathe in years. She ran to the scarecrow, embracing the new, strong, confident Thomas. The real Thomas could only watch from the floor, his body now a discarded heap of skin and dry filler, unable to warn her. He had been replaced by the only thing capable of running a failing farm. An entity, built only to endure emptiness.
Poor Thomas, meeting such a tragic fate. Hopefully the new Thomas has better luck running that farm. You never know what kind of malevolent being could be roaming in those fields. Speaking of malevolence, let's talk about some of the mischievous things teenagers tend to do during Hallows Eve. It's as the saying goes, too old to trick or treat, too young to die. So what else is there to do? Well, in this story, written by The Last Something, we follow 3 young boys on a night out of Halloween mischief. Bored and with nothing to do, they go searching for a local urban legend. They go looking for the grave of Molly C.
Tim found a grave a week ago. When he told Brad and Dan, Brad insisted they drive out and see it together.
Hey, you guys remember the old ghost stories?
Brad asked, his fingers tapping on the steering wheel.
It was our local urban legend.
What are you talking about? Dan asked.
Tim said the name on the grave was Molly C, right? It's haunted.
Oh shit. Yeah, I remember now. Kids always went looking for her on Halloween. Why is it haunted?
Tim asked from the back seat. She was a war widow. She couldn't believe her husband was gone, so she spent the rest of her life waiting for him to come home. They say her spirit's still waiting. If you stand on her grave and say her name 3 times, she'll appear and mistake you for her lost husband and, take you away.
Ah, that doesn't sound right,
Dan argued. Hey man, that's the story.
Oh, sounds fake. Hey, stop up there. We can hike the rest of the way.
Parked on the side of the road, Brad opened the trunk, retrieving 2 shovels. Whoa, what are those for? Tim asked.
'Cause I want to dig that bitch up. See if it's a real grave.
Whoa, no way. Tim shook his head. Brad shrugged and handed Dan a shovel.
Fine. Stay here then. Wait in the car by yourself if you're so scared. Alright, let's go.
Tim sighed and reluctantly led the way. It was hard to find in the dark woods, but after an hour they finally stood on the grave of Molly C. The marker was simple, 2 planks nailed together in a cross. Worn down and rotten, her name was barely legible. Brad shouted her name 3 times and waited for a response.
Well, let's get digging,
he said, picking up a shovel. Tim held a flashlight while the others dug. Exhausted and standing deep in the earth, Dan finally saw something. Squatting down for a closer look, he asked.
Holy shit, is that a hand?
Hell yeah it is,
Brad said, examining the bones. Reinvigorated, they quickly cleared away dirt, revealing her full skeleton.
Hey, what's that around her neck?
Tim asked as he peered down.
It's metal. I think it's a sickle,
Dan said, grabbing the rusted blade and pulling it free.
Dude, her teeth look crazy sharp,
Brad said, leaning closer. In a flash, a skeletal hand grabbed Brad by the neck. Bony fingers dug into his flesh, tearing open his throat, unleashing a waterfall of blood. Tim screamed, stumbled backwards and fell. He watched Dan frantically try to climb out of the hole. Then Dan was gone, pulled down into the grave. Tim sat frozen as the skeleton emerged drenched in blood. Sinewy muscles and pale skin grew rapidly, covering the bones. Long strands of red hair sprouted from a growing scalp. She pounced on him, pinning him down.
Molly?
Lips formed, then stretched into a sharp smile.
Thirsty.
And sank her fangs into Tim's neck. It looks like Tim and his friends became Molly's tasty treats for Halloween. Personally, I would have played it safe and stuck with trick-or-treating. But sometimes we just give in to peer pressure. Much like the boy in our final story. Written by Busy Lizzie, we follow a young boy giving in to the pressures of a Halloween dare. It's not just a simple choice of trick or treat, but when you get chosen to give me something good to eat.
It's just a house. Leaves crunched under my feet. I glanced back at Tyler and George beyond the iron gate, wide-eyed, waving me on, egging me to get closer. Just knock on the door, and they'll never call you a scaredy cat again. The old man's house loomed above. People rarely saw him. Rumors spread that he kidnapped children and kept their bones in jars. Porch creaked. As I lifted my hand to knock, the door swung open. I turned to run, but George and Tyler smiled excitingly. "Go in, Percy," they whisper shouted across the yard. One step inside, then back to trick-or-treating. Hesitantly, I stepped inside the foyer. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust. Cobwebs hung in the corners. A large oil painting depicted a man cradling a child. The man wore a mask of a stag. The child in the painting, he looked like me. A cold sweat crept up my neck.
I turned to the door, but suddenly I was standing at the end of a long corridor, rooms dimly lit along both sides. I turned again and found myself face to face with the stag. I screamed. It took a moment to realize it was just the oil painting, now a foot in front of me. The foyer was gone. The corridor was my only option. I edged towards the first doorway. Inside, the stag masked man lounged on a chase. He turned his head, locking eyes with me. I ran. Each room I passed showed the exact same scene, the stag man drawing closer every time. Reaching the end of the corridor, I pulled the door open and stumbled down the stairs into the cellar. I heard the sound of footsteps following behind me. I scrambled for a hiding place. I found a crawl space and army crawled through, my arms scraping on roots and broken glass as the passageway narrowed. Ahead, I saw a sliver of light. Then something grabbed my ankle. I beat against wooden boards, kicking furiously to shake whatever had a hold of me. The boards finally gave away and I pulled myself into the yard. It was daytime. Birds sang and I ran towards the gate, but they wouldn't budge. Relief flooded me as I spotted my dad walking Argo. "Dad, help!" As he approached, Argo started barking wildly. There's something in there. A man, or something. I got trapped in... My dad squinted, struggling to hear me over Argo's barking.
Okay, listen, I'm gonna drop my dog off at home and I'll be right back, sir.
I froze in place. I watched as my dad walked a few doors down to our house.
Purse,
He yelled.
come grab Argo.
Our door swung open, a child's hand holding it ajar. "Come on, Argo." I heard my voice call from within. He stole my body. How would I convince my dad that I'm his son? That he's actually he's my... Wait, what was it that I needed to tell that guy? I know it's something important. What an unfortunate way to spend your Halloween. But it doesn't seem like Percy will remember enough of it to be bothered by it. Oh, wow. Would you look at the time? It's amazing how we tend to lose track of time just like that. Well, I should probably make my rounds and check on the other patients. Don't worry though. I'll be back tomorrow to deliver you more fun stories all about the misadventures of Halloween. But before I go, let me ask you one question. Trick or treat? Thank you all for listening. I've been your host and narrator, Ryan Blue. If you like what you heard here today, please consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment down below. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a like and pressing that bell notification so you don't miss out on future episodes. Remember, you can find SpinalTap Horror on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can also follow me on social media at SKZombieCorpse to see everything else I tend to dig my hands into. If you have a story you'd like to share with us for consideration, you can post it to our subreddit at r/SpinalTapHorror or email us at spinaltaphorrorpod@gmail.com. All stories in tonight's episodes were adapted and performed with the written consent of the story's authors. All music featured with said stories can be found for free of use on pixabay.com. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you for the next operation.